Hello, buongiorno. Thank you. I'm on another roll today with some great topics. Espresso with Vinny. This is Vinny, my pit bull. I am David, the host, dog trainer and behaviorist. And the topics are going to be really cool. We're going to understand, do dogs really understand time? Some people say they don't. Maybe some people say they do. But at the end of this, it'll be your decision to think about that. Also, dog communication. We've been locked in this little rule of five senses for way too long. Physics has gone through leaps and heads, way ahead of most people realize. And people use these little buzzwords and these little cliches like quantum physics and, drop the red pill or the blue pill. But today we're going to learn a little bit about this. So we're not just talking a lot of hot air to sound cool with our friends and not knowing anything. I'm going to continue to educate the public little by little about quantum physics and communications with animals and some of my own personal experiences. All right. So let's start with some of these first topics. But first, you know the ritual, Vinny and the espresso hour. My espresso's got a little vanilla. Not his. I don't know if it'd be so good for him. But it's obvious. Vinny still is a big fan of espresso. And since it's a little chilly out now during winter, he's still got his little Ferrari scarf here. That's why we're doing everything indoors today. All right, let's get going. So, circadian time. Time clocks. Let's help humans, let's help humans understand time, right? Okay. I've always believed that animals, in some ways, as simplistic as they are, they're more directly close to that quantum air and physics because they communicate in this way, because the least path of resistance in biology. For them, in many ways, sometimes it is in another level and beyond the five senses. But before we run that, let's get out of that. That was my teaser. Talk through what time is. Time really is a definition of a measurement. It really doesn't have a universal existence unless we can measure it, because the universe has always been here and it'll never go away. Right? There's no wall, so there's no gatekeeper, there's no iron curtain in the Wizard of Oz. It's infinite. So it's something as us mortals just forget about truly trying to understand it. Just accept it. It's one of those things we just lay back and hey, God didn't ask us how we were going to design things. It just was done. So understanding a measurement of time. So certain theories of light speed, and if you were to travel at the speed of light, Einstein's theories, if you were to start making those speeds and you went away and you came back and everyone was aged, and I'm sure some of you have heard these stories, under theories of relativity, you would see everybody was old on planet Earth and you were traveling the speed of light, which starts to take a molecular size and condense it into a smaller size, infinite, into that size. But measurement is what I'm getting at. Molecular measurement, mass and molecular measurement in a space is what would have that effect. Now we come into an atmosphere like Earth, and we're all dealing with this clock of what we developed, because we can measure the width. We've created a measurement system, whether it's metric or English, and we're creating how the circumference of the Earth, how long it takes for it to rotate around the sun. So dogs, just like people, we get used to a rhythm, a reliable rhythm. We wake up at a certain time and our body's already saying, hey, it feels like the sun's going to come up soon or the sun's going to go down. And so we have these magnetic pulses as well that go around the world. And so that we find that move around, that you see in the northern lights, that these magnetic fields, magnetic pulses, also can trigger migratory animals, or times when you go out and hunt and prey-driven animals like these little apex predators like Vinny, even though he's looking quite domesticated today. Yeah, he still will instinctually want to run out into my yard and go look at where the squirrels and the rabbits are at certain times. So he knows they're out. It doesn't mean he knows how to necessarily say, go eat something, because he always gets fed. And so hunger really isn't an issue with him. Through just simple Darwinism of animals learning taught to say, okay, we need to eat to live, taught their offspring that. And so the strongest ones, the will to survive, kept going. So a lot of times your domestic animal will kill something and then just sit there and look at it and not know what to do with it. So realize that a lot of it is being taught when it takes into further steps. But that doesn't take away from the fact that something was instinctual, that the magnetic pulse and the rhythms of the earth and the sun and the going up and down didn't trigger something in your animal. So funny thing is that I would see many times when I'd work with clients, if I was doing just hour lessons, after 6, 7, 8 lessons with the client, the dog right there, right around 57 minutes, started acting all goofy like a kid getting ready to go to recess. I couldn't wait to go have their food and go play on the swings. And it was consistent, but that never happened before. So the dog started to learn a measurement of time and know that there are hour lessons. Now they don't have a watch to look at, but that's why I'm saying we need to get outside the 5 senses. There's you have things visual, of course, right? The position of sun. Migratory birds can also be detecting the North Star. There's many different ways within our 5 senses, but there's also ways outside of the 5 senses that we've proven. So physics has taken a barrier through these 5 senses, and we're proving a lot of theories in the quantum realm. So getting out of, when people are saying like, you got to get out of the 3rd dimension, they're doing their chakra. Well, now you can actually be able to relate, because I want to little by little educate you like going into what is when you're getting into that 4D. What's that 4th dimension going in? So in the quantum world, we see molecular, and we see atoms, we see protons, and we see electrons, and these suckers are usually all on a balance. So if it's 2 and 2 and 3 and 3 proton electron on a molecule, they're balanced. But we do have something that where they get tangled, intertwined, and they become radicals, and that's usually having to do with the environment, the effect of light. So blue light photons, light, when we dissect it more into a photon, hits it and it can bend it and cause spins. So in these spins is where we really start to see what we can detect in signatures. That's how we're detecting things in outer space, far distance planets, and looking at how when light, once it hits it, or if we were to send a radio wave signal, how does it bounce off it from testing in laboratories here? That creates a signature, a wave, think of it. So we have something in these entanglement of molecules where we call them the free radicals. Now the spin can go into a triplet where both of these are, once they're affected by blue light, there you get pairs. So these pairs can be spinning in the same direction or the opposite direction. So they call it a singlet. So when that happens, when blue light hits it, I know that I could see something that is a signature. So were you going into this even in quantum cryptology? And birds, for instance, that are migratory have certain proteins on their retina that you don't find on pigeons and chickens that don't care to migrate. Okay, we're seeing this on animals. So there is some very interesting phenomena that take place, and I'm kind of throwing things out there to let you use your own creativity to understand dog communication. So I'm going to look into more of some of the tests that I did throughout my years of dog training in my youth. When I was in my 20s, I was running around in the jungles of Latin America, and I had my German Shepherds, and we would run out there at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was quite interesting. I know my kids think I'm nuts when I tell them these stories. So I could hear, the panthers and the jaguars roaring, and there's walking spiders that'll kill you, and there's all kinds of Florentine snakes that bite you, and they're like a hemoglobin neurotoxin that'll make you flop like a fish on the ground and kill you in a few hours. So I would walk out there at night, usually on a full moon. It was kind of cool because I wanted to use my certain amount of certain navigation. But when you get into deep into the jungle, the canopy, you cannot circumnavigate from a moon easily. Sometimes you can, but definitely not from the stars at that point. So I would take my dogs deep into the forest, and I would switch them out from no leash to long leads, like 30-foot leads. And I would take them deep into the forest, and then the rain, of course, would pound. 6 months out of the year, you just get insane rain. So I always laugh when people complain about rain here in the US, where you can't even see the front windshield of your car. It's so hard. So it would be pounding down, and of course, we're under the canopy of the leaves, so we don't have the impact of the rain as hard. But what you do see is, you see that dogs aren't necessarily going to be able to rely on the typical 5 senses of scent so easily, because this is going on day after day, month after month. So the rain, as it's pounding down, and we're in complete darkness under that canopy, we're moving through the forest, and you really can't see much. Now you have these, I know you people have seen them bought at supermarkets. There's palmetto, and you dice it up and put it in your salads. Well, a lot of those come in from a little palm. Okay, it's in the trunk. And so what the ranchers do down in Latin America is they take their machete and they have to chop on the sides the bark, because they have these needles that stick out about that far. The indigenous people, the Indians, will use them as wonderful blowgun darts, right? Kids don't try this at home, right? And so they put those on the poison arrow frogs and like boil it, and then they shit you, knock you over, carry you off. So you have to be very careful when you're walking at night, because these things will go right through your army boots. And you guys you talk to in the special forces know what I'm talking about. These things will go right through your uniforms. They're wicked. Okay, so you don't just run through jungles, nor do the dogs. So the amazing thing is, so I would experiment with my dogs going through the jungles, and you're forced to again take a different path in communication. Like, what is in my surroundings? I can't really see. So I have to start going to my mind and say, what do I feel? So interesting thing that I was learning in martial arts years ago was Japanese used to call it wushin, I think was the way they referred to it as. And that's when they would blindfold the samurai and work on feeling your opponent coming into an attack versus visual. Okay. So I'm not the first and not the last, and there's many people that deserve the credit before me to be experimenting with feeling of energy. So I would have my dogs on these long lines, no need for putting anything over my eyes or the dogs, because you can't see anything as it is. So I'm moving through these forests and I'm going by what I feel. And sometimes I'd be walking along and all of a sudden I'd stop, my consciousness would hit me. And I'd go, I don't know why, but I'm sure not going to question, second guess at this point. So I would look and move my head around and see if I could get a reflection of light of the moon coming through the leaves. Suddenly I'd see this massive spider web, and there'd be a spider about that big, just sitting there in the middle, and it'd be right near my face. And I'd be looking at it, you know, how'd you do? And I would slowly move around it and go around. So what triggered that in me, right? So I can only go by like, I'm reverse engineering. I got a reaction out of my mind and my body. How it took place, how I detected it, that was not known. I would get deeper and deeper into the jungles, and I would watch my dogs, my German Shepherds, become more savage. You know, they would just start getting more intense and more intense the further that we made it away from civilization at night. And then I would at some point say to them, give them the signal, okay, go home. And those guys would look at me, give me the eye contact that I couldn't really barely see. And I just see like sometimes their ears pivoting a little bit, and bam, they would take off. So that was my job at that point, trust them, because they're going to take me ripping through that forest. And it's amazing how I would think, didn't I come this way? And or second guess myself. And then the dogs are going, no, it's that way, without hesitation. They ran. So we'd be running along like this, going through it. I'm praying to God I'm not going to get stuck by a needle through my body or whatever that's going on. And I'm moving along through these jungles. And it's amazing how they never second guessed. Like, they knew exactly where to go as the rain's pounding. It's ruining any type of tracking of scent, anything. Like, they're not peeing and marking. There was no time for that. When they're going through the jungles, there's so much animal life and intense sound. It's not like a domesticated dog walking around your neighborhood, peeing on every tree and every corner of a building. And therefore, I would follow them, trust them, and eventually I would come out to a clearing and I'd go, wow, my dogs took me on a different path, even back to the house, but the shortest path. Like, they knew how to go directly the shortest distance versus my opinion of entering the forest where I knew to do it. Because I lived up in the highland rainforest, it was like 8,000 feet many times, or the lowland jungles. I would test them at different areas. So it's not unknown that dogs, I even had clients that would, in Los Angeles, move to a house 10 miles away, they'd tell me, and their dogs would show up at their new house, never knew where it was. They left them they gave them to a neighbor. And they adopted them to the neighbor. They were moving a new place and they couldn't take the dog with them. And now the neighbor is saying, hey, you know, the dog's gone. It ran out of the yard, ran 10 miles and found them. So follow me. Now we're going to get deepy and spooky on this. So let's go back to quantum physics, because we want an explanation. We've seen obviously how whales and birds will migrate. How do they know how to do that? Because it can't always be done with the five senses. We know that. There's storms. You can't always read the stars. There's not always a scent you can rely on. There's hurricanes and winds. So there's many factors where five senses fail. but yet these animals are still getting it done. And animals are still finding their owners or finding where they're supposed to migrate, literally down to the tree. Okay. Simplest forms of life, butterflies, hummingbirds, can do this. So we know it's not an issue of intelligence. We know it is more something that is built into there, but there's always an explanation. There's always an explanation. And now physics are truly teaching us where this explanation is. We're looking at birds and we're saying, how would they navigate around the globe? Right? Because like many of these birds and these sparrows that they did studies on out of Europe, where they would migrate, maybe 30% of them, they would estimate, would actually survive this first time migration. And then they have like a recording in their brain, even if there was a storm or a hurricane. With the storm or a hurricane, they have a recording where they actually know, these birds from Europe, the sparrows, where to follow and go. But their first run, maybe only 30% of them survive. What happened is they have these, what we call cryptochromes. It's a protein on the retina inside the eye that they would get a fad, which a blue light hits, a photon from light, and it would actually create these free radicals. Going back to the quantum physics level, these molecules in this cryptochrome on the retina would change in whether they're spinning in pairs the same direction, okay, in the singlet, or a triplet opposites, going like that. You have to understand that they have all signatures. So something in their eyes and the magnetic field going around the earth is getting affected by this. And they're so subtle, and they actually don't have a very good longevity. They actually, these free radicals, they're delicate, but they're lightweight. And because it's a molecule, time and space, as I was telling you before, don't become as relative as you and I see things. So it could be 300 miles away, it could be 4,000 miles away. These communication signals send copies from one place to another with an identified signature. And now this animal knows how to migrate. And it is not something that is constant. So sometimes they go by what they know to hold course. There's a compass, like a magnetic pulse in them. So it can go from the 5 senses in 3D to quantum physics. In the 1950s and 60s, a lot of tests were done with the United States, with the CIA, with Stanford University, and with the Rockefellers and the Soviets, as they were in competition for submarine communication and stealth communication. So they were looking at animals as much as we do. That's how we've developed some of our more high-tech uniforms that are camouflage, studying chameleons and so forth in labs. So this is nothing new in the practice. Interesting thing is that when you read these things, you're seeing how much some of these generational wealth families, like the Rockefellers, already had their tentacles in research, very sophisticated research, in co-op with the CIA and labs. And why? I'll leave that for your imagination if we come fast forward to 2024. And who is the one who is controlling the CIA? What were they created for? For information, propaganda, anti-espionage, influencing countries, until one day they decided our country would become a target ourselves. So, and it all goes back to money, who put it in. But I'll leave that for you to spin off of. Going back to the research that was done, so the Soviets, yeah, they took what they call scorpion submarine back then, 1960s. And they took a little baby bunny from Mama Bunny. They had their Mama Bunny on land, put baby bunny in scorpion submarine, put it down a few fathoms, okay? Then they put on the electrodes on Mama Bunny to see what we call baseline, see how Mama Bunny was normally. And then they didn't communicate with each other until they harmed her baby bunny down there to see if there was a disturbance in Mama Bunny on the land. And the Mama Bunny completely changed its electromagnetic fields in its brain when the baby bunny down the fathoms below the sea was harmed. So that told them, because that was the point of the experiment. You always have, like when you're on RF frequencies, radio frequencies, two-way, when you're using protocol from your cell phone, it has a lot of limitations. It can bounce off metals. It can, different magnetic fields can affect it. Of course, solar flares, but definitely not going through water. Right? It's getting absorbed, broken up. Now we're going into where would this go when you're starting to move towards communicating down below the ocean, right? So that became a breakthrough for the Soviets, and they still couldn't figure out how it was done on a physics level. Coming forward to today, yes, we are seeing this because in quantum physics has advanced enough to understand the molecular process of understanding these free radicals and signatures. So we're relying on light refraction and bending of molecules, even at great distances in other planets, to read what are on those planets. I will give an example. So gases, phosphine. It's become a big study with a very interesting lady who is studying phosphine. She's a specialist just in this, but why phosphine? Because you see phosphine in areas that it's produced only because there's life forms. When you see like a dead moon and dead planets that don't have life forms, they don't contain phosphine. Now we're being able to study blue light refraction hitting certain planets, and some of these planets have abundance of phosphine. So that's how we're getting signal that most likely they can have some sort of life form. So believe me, as the physics grows and quantum understanding of quantum physics, there's going to be a great knowledge of how animals communicate and how you say, well, that was my gut intuition. What was the dog really thinking and learning? But believe me, there's many things that we're breaking into, and some people, just like anybody else, some people have more aptitude than others. And so we see different breeds of dogs have more aptitude than others. The US Army has done experiments where they've put C4 explosives down into the sand, buried it 50 feet, and had the waves wash over it 24 hours, and then bring the canine units out. And when they bring the canine units out, they knew exactly where the C4 explosives were. And then, of course, the dogs never saw where it got buried. Now we're not dealing with 5 senses anymore. Understand what I'm saying? So that was some of the experiments that the US government was doing as well to understand communication lines. Every type of material, this cup, anything like this, has a signature. Your flesh has a signature. So obviously animals have this gift, much more superior to the average human, but we can learn so much from them. So I hope you enjoyed my show today and a little spin-off on dog behavior. And hopefully if you like it, comment, and there'll be more on physics. Okay? Cheers, arrivederci. Thank you so much. Love my fans.